Mark leaned against the cold metal wall of the space station, wiping sweat from his forehead. The station was small and isolated, orbiting a tiny, unexplored planet at the edge of known space. Life here was quiet, almost lonely, but Mark liked it. The hum of machinery and the occasional chatter over the comms were his only companions. As he adjusted a power conduit, a sudden noise in the docking bay caught his attention. It was soft at first, almost like a whimper, but it grew louder. Mark frowned. Visitors were rare this far from inhabited space. Curiosity pushed him forward. He walked toward the docking bay, boots echoing on the metal floor. When he reached the bay, he froze. There, huddled near the bulkhead, was a small alien girl. She was no taller than a human child of 8, with large, glowing violet eyes that seemed both frightened and tired. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer, and her hair floated around her head like liquid silver. She wore tattered clothing that barely covered her, and she trembled with hunger. Mark's heart clenched. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly, careful not to scare her. The girl flinched but didn't run. She stared at him, her eyes wide. She made a strange, soft noise, almost like a hum. Mark bent down slowly, keeping his hands visible. I have some food," he said, patting his bag. "Do you want it?" The girl's ears twitched. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Mark opened his pack and handed her a nutrient bar. She sniffed it, then took it in small, cautious bites. Within moments, her trembling slowed. She looked at him with gratitude shining in her glowing eyes. Mark smiled. "There, that's better, isn't it?" The girl nodded and gave a small hum that sounded almost like laughter. Mark laughed softly. "You must be really hungry to come all the way out here alone." Before he could ask more, the station's main doors opened with a hiss. Mark turned sharply, expecting security, but instead a figure stepped inside. Tall, regal, commanding. It was a woman unlike anyone Mark had ever seen. Her skin had the same faint shimmer as the girl's, and her hair flowed like liquid light. Her eyes glowed with a bright violet hue. She wore an elaborate robe adorned with strange patterns that seemed to shift as she moved. Mark stood frozen. Who are you?" The woman's gaze snapped to him. "You have fed my daughter." Her voice was melodic but carried a weight that made Mark's chest tighten. "Do you understand what this means?" Mark shook his head. I just gave her some food." She looked hungry. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You have invoked the ancient binding. By feeding her, you are now part of our family. You belong to us according to the old laws." Mark blinked. "Wait, what?" "Belong to you? I don't understand." The girl looked up at him, shy but not afraid. She seemed to nod slightly at the woman, almost confirming what she had said. Mark ran a hand over his face. He had read about alien customs, strange traditions, and bizarre rituals. But this was something entirely different. "You're serious?" The woman, who Mark now realized must be Queen Elara, stepped closer. Her presence was commanding. Every being who feeds a child in need of sustenance is bound to serve the family forever. It is not negotiable. You will come with us to our homeworld, or face the consequences of refusal. Mark's mind raced. His life, his work, his freedom. It all felt like it had been ripped away in an instant. "I can't just go with you. I have duties here, work to finish." Queen Elara tilted her head, her glowing eyes studying him like one studies a fragile object. "Your choices are no longer yours. The law is older than your kind. You will obey." The girl, Lyra, took a small step toward him, her tiny hand reaching for his. "He helped me," she whispered in a soft voice. Mark looked down at her. Her trust and innocence tugged at him, and despite the fear gnawing at his chest, he knew he could not abandon her. I don't know what to do, little one," he said. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, almost pleading. "Stay." Mark sighed, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. He could refuse and risk angering a powerful alien queen, or he could comply, learn their ways, and try to protect Lyra. Before he could make a decision, a transporter pad activated behind them. Elara gestured toward it. "Time is short. You will come. Resistance is unwise." Mark glanced at Lyra, who looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. He swallowed hard. Okay. I'll go, but you have to promise me. Nothing will happen to her." Queen Elara's expression softened just slightly. "She is under my protection. And now so are you. Come." The transporter hummed and a shimmering field surrounded them. Mark felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the air itself was pulling at his body. The station around him blurred and vanished, replaced by streaks of light. When the sensation stopped, they were no longer in the station. The view outside the transporter pad left Mark speechless. Before him stretched a landscape of glowing forests, floating mountains, and rivers of light. The sky was deep indigo, dotted with two suns, one larger than the other. The air shimmered faintly, filled with floating particles that reflected the light like tiny stars. Lyra gasped, holding Mark's hand tightly. "Home," she whispered. Mark could only stare. He had traveled through space before, seen many wonders, but nothing like this. It was beautiful, alien and dangerous all at once. Queen Ilara's gaze swept over him. "This is Zithara, our home. You will learn our ways here. You will serve. And you will care for my daughter." Mark nodded slowly. He didn't feel like he had a choice. But as he looked down at Lyra, who clung to him with trust and hope, he realized that maybe this was not punishment. Maybe this was an opportunity to show the value of humanity, the kindness and ingenuity that humans possessed. He might be bound by an ancient law, yes, but perhaps his presence here could make a difference. Not just for Lyra, but for her entire world. Queen Ilara turned and walked forward, Lyra following closely. Mark hesitated for a moment, then stepped after them. Every step he took on this alien planet was strange and unfamiliar, but he refused to let fear dominate him. He had faced challenges before, and he would face these too. The glowing forests whispered in the wind, alien creatures flitted between the floating trees, and the distant mountains seemed alive with energy. Mark felt small, yes, but not powerless. He had survived far worse than this, and he still had his mind, his courage, and his determination. Lyra tugged at his hand. "Come," she said softly. Her simple trust gave him strength. Mark took a deep breath and followed her, stepping fully into a world that would change him forever. He did not yet know the trials ahead, the strange customs he would have to navigate, or the dangers that lurked beyond the glowing forests. But he knew one thing for certain. Feeding one small child had set events in motion that he could never undo. And as Queen Aelara's eyes glowed with quiet intensity behind him, Mark realized that the story of this human, and the alien family he had become bound to, was only just beginning. Mark stepped carefully onto the soft, glowing ground of Zithara, his boots leaving faint, shimmering prints. The air was different, thicker than he was used to, humming faintly with energy, and carrying a scent like sweet flowers and metal. He looked around in awe. Strange creatures flitted through the trees, wings glowing with colors he had never seen before. Rivers of liquid light twisted between floating stones, reflecting the two suns above in dazzling patterns. Lyra skipped ahead, her small hand still gripping his. "Follow me," she said. Her voice was soft but confident, as if she had done this many times. Mark tried to keep up. Okay, he said, his eyes wide. "Where are we going?" "To my home," Lyra replied, glancing back with a smile. "Mama is waiting," Mark swallowed hard. He was still nervous. Queen Aelara had made it clear that he had no choice in coming to Zithara. Yet there was something in the way Lyra looked at him, trusting, innocent, hopeful, that made him feel he had to do this. Protecting her had become his first goal. As they walked, Mark noticed how different everything was. Trees floated in the air, supported by glowing roots. Plants pulsed with soft light. The creatures of Zithara were not hostile, but they watched him with cautious curiosity. He realized he was an intruder in a world that had existed long before humans had ever left Earth. After a while, they reached a grand structure in the middle of a bioluminescent forest. It was taller than any building Mark had seen, made of crystal-like materials that seemed alive, shifting slightly as he looked at them. He could see streams of light moving inside like living rivers and figures gliding along the walls as if the building itself guided them. "This is," Mark began, but Lyra interrupted. "Home," she said proudly. The doors opened as they approached, and Mark followed cautiously. Inside, the air was warm and filled with a soft hum of energy. Aliens moved gracefully, their glowing eyes observing him but not approaching. He realized he was being judged silently. Every movement, every word. Queen Alara stepped forward, her presence filling the space. "Mark," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is our home. Here you will learn our ways and our laws. You will follow them strictly. And you will care for my daughter. Mark nodded, feeling both awe and unease. I understand, he said. I will do my best. Alara's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. Your best is not enough. You must adapt quickly. Zithara does not tolerate ignorance or carelessness. Mark swallowed. I will try. Lyra tugged at his hand. Don't worry, she whispered. I will help you. Over the next few days, Mark began to learn the ways of Zithara. The rules were complex, many more than any human law. Every action had meaning. Greetings gestures. Even the way he moved through a room could be seen as respectful or disrespectful. Mistakes could be punished. At first, Mark stumbled constantly. He bowed incorrectly, used the wrong tone when speaking, and even misinterpreted Lyra's words. Queen Alara watched each mistake silently, her expression unreadable. He felt foolish, but he refused to give up. Lyra became his guide. She explained the customs in her simple way, showing him how to greet elders, how to move without offending, and how to communicate with the floating devices the Zytherans used for work and travel. You just need to watch and learn, she said one evening as they walked along a glowing river. We do things differently here, but Mama, she will trust you if you show you care. Mark nodded. I just hope I can. I don't want to let her down. Or you, Lyra smiled softly. You won't. Mark also began to see the beauty and intelligence of Zithara's technology. Machines moved with almost organic precision, repairing themselves when broken. Energy flowed through the city like water, powering everything silently. Aliens manipulated devices with gestures and thought, showing a harmony of mind and machine that humans had not yet achieved. Mark could not help but admire it. But he also noticed inefficiencies that a human engineer could fix. Small repairs, clever adjustments, and combinations of human logic and alien technology began to improve minor systems. Slowly, other aliens started noticing. One day, Mark was called to help in the main energy hub. A system feeding the floating gardens was malfunctioning, causing the plants to droop and lose their glow. Several Zitharan engineers worked frantically, but their methods were slow. Mark stepped forward. May I try? He asked, careful to bow correctly. The lead engineer hesitated but nodded. You may, but do not damage anything. Zithara's systems are delicate. Mark inspected the problem. Using his human intuition, he realized a small energy conduit had misaligned and caused a cascade failure in the system. With careful adjustments, he restored the flow. Instantly, the plants regained their glow, the gardens pulsing with light once more. Several engineers paused, impressed. Mark felt a small surge of pride. Lyra clapped her hands quietly. Good job, she whispered. Queen Alara appeared suddenly, having watched from a distance. She studied Mark for a long moment. Then she nodded slightly. It was not praise, but it was acknowledgement. Mark felt a spark of hope. Perhaps he could prove himself. As the days passed, Mark continued to learn the Zitharan ways. He adapted to their meals, their sleeping patterns, and even their unique communication methods using gestures and subtle sounds. He grew closer to Lyra, spending time teaching her small human games and learning about her favorite Zitharan traditions. Yet, not everything was easy. Some aliens remained suspicious of him. They whispered that humans were unpredictable, even dangerous. One morning, while repairing a minor device in the central hall, Mark noticed two aliens watching him closely. Their expressions were hard to read, but he sensed doubt. He realized that gaining trust would take time, patience, and constant demonstration of his loyalty. His bond with Lyra, however, strengthened. She began to show him hidden paths, secret gardens, and little-known places where the light of Zithara created illusions of floating islands and dancing colors. One evening, as Mark and Lyra walked along a glowing cliff, she spoke quietly. Mama says you are different. You think differently. You see things we do not. That is why you will stay, Mark smiled. I hope I can help her. And you? Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. You already do. Every day. Despite the beauty of Zithara and the kindness of Lyra, Mark could not ignore the weight of Queen Alara's words. He was bound by an ancient law, something older than human civilization itself. He was a stranger in this world, tethered by a promise he did not fully understand. Still, Mark refused to be passive. He began to observe, learning the alien systems, their politics, and even their small weaknesses, not to exploit them, but to prepare himself for challenges. He wanted to be ready for anything that could threaten Lyra or her people. One afternoon, while examining the energy flow of a small device near the palace, Mark overheard two Zitharan officials discussing a growing tension with a neighboring planet. They spoke of potential threats and the need for stronger defenses. Though the language was partially foreign, Mark could understand enough to know that danger was coming. He realized then that his presence was more than a matter of law. It could be vital. If he could help, even in small ways, he could prove that humans were valuable allies, not just servants bound by an ancient curse. That evening, he shared his observations with Lyra. "Something is coming," he said quietly. "I don't know exactly what, but we need to be ready." Lyra's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Mama will listen to you if you show her you care," she said. "She respects what you do." Mark sighed and looked at the glowing horizon. He thought of Earth, of the space station he had left behind, of his quiet life. Everything was gone. But perhaps it was gone for a reason. He had been given a chance, not just to survive, but to make a difference. And with Lyra by his side, he felt the courage to face the unknown. Zithara was beautiful, strange, and dangerous, but Mark was determined. He would learn, adapt, and prove that humanity had value far beyond what the aliens could imagine. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the glowing forest, Mark made a silent promise to himself and to Lyra. He would protect her. He would protect Zithara. And he would show the galaxy that even a human, bound by an ancient alien law, could change the fate of an entire world. Mark had begun to understand Zithara, but understanding did not mean acceptance. The rules were complex, the customs strict, and Queen Elara's gaze weighed on him constantly. Every misstep could be interpreted as disrespect. Every mistake could have consequences. He felt as if he were walking on a tightrope stretched across the stars. Early one morning, Queen Elara summoned him to the main hall of the palace. The hall shimmered with soft light and the walls seemed alive, pulsing gently as if breathing. Lyra skipped ahead of him, her small hand brushing against his arm. "Good luck," she whispered. Mark swallowed and nodded. He had been summoned many times before, but this time felt different. Elara's eyes glowed with intensity as she looked at him. "Mark," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you have come far, but you must prove your loyalty. You have entered our world, our home, and you are bound by the law of the ancients. Your dedication must be shown through action, not words." He nodded. "I understand. What must I do?" Elara gestured to three objects in the center of the hall. One was a puzzle-like device made of interlocking crystals. Another was a strange tool used for energy manipulation. And the third was a map of the floating mountains surrounding the palace. "You will complete these tasks," Elara said. "You will solve the puzzle, restore the energy flow, and navigate the terrain. Only then will you begin to earn your place." Mark felt a surge of determination. Each task was difficult, but none seemed impossible. He approached the puzzle first. The crystals shimmered with light and rearranged themselves when touched incorrectly. Mark studied them, observing the patterns and colors. Slowly, carefully, he moved the crystals into the correct formation. When the final piece clicked into place, the puzzle glowed brightly, a sign of completion. Elara's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a hint of approval. "You think carefully. That is human ingenuity. It is useful." Encouraged, Mark moved to the energy tool. The device had been misaligned, causing fluctuations in the palace's energy flow. Mark had learned a few tricks from observing the Zitharans, but this required combining his human experience with their alien methods. He adjusted conduits, aligned energy streams, and calibrated the tool until it hummed perfectly. The light around him stabilized, flowing evenly through the palace. Lyra clapped quietly. "You did it," she whispered, pride shining in her glowing eyes. Mark smiled at her, then turned to the final task, navigating the floating mountains. The map was complex and the terrain was dangerous. Floating rocks, shifting air currents, and glowing energy fields made the journey treacherous. He took a deep breath and began. Using a combination of careful observation, quick thinking, and steady movement, Mark climbed the first floating ridge. He leaped across small gaps, adjusted his path when the air currents shifted, and relied on his instincts to avoid hazards. Hours passed and fatigue threatened to slow him, but he pressed on. Finally, he reached the summit, planting a small flag at the highest point. The energy of the mountains reacted, casting beams of light across the sky. Mark looked out over the landscape, exhausted but proud. He had completed the tasks. Returning to the palace, he found Queen Elara waiting. Her expression was unreadable, as always. "You have succeeded in the tasks," she said. "But your loyalty is not proven. Loyalty is tested not by skill alone, but by courage, integrity, and dedication to our people." Mark nodded. "I am ready for any test," he said. Elara's eyes glowed faintly. "Then you shall face the trial of service. You will assist in the council, aid the engineers, and protect the vulnerable. Your actions will determine whether you are worthy." The next days were intense. Mark worked alongside Zitharan engineers, helping repair damaged devices, restore energy flows, and streamline the floating garden's irrigation systems. He studied their methods, offering suggestions that often combined human logic with Zitharan technology. Some engineers were skeptical, but results spoke louder than words. The gardens flourished, the energy stabilized, and minor malfunctions vanished. At the council, Mark observed the leaders discuss matters of trade, defense, and diplomacy. The language was intricate, full of gestures and subtle tones. Mark tried to follow, occasionally nodding or using small phrases he had learned from Lyra. Though he could not contribute fully yet, his careful observation and occasional suggestions impressed some of the younger leaders, who began to respect him quietly. Lyra became his constant companion during these trials. She translated words, explained gestures, and whispered encouragement. "Mama respects your effort," she said one evening as they rested in a glowing garden. "You help people, and that matters," Mark smiled. "I hope so. I want to earn her trust and yours too." But not everyone welcomed him. A small faction of the council watched him warily, murmuring that humans were unpredictable and unfit to meddle in Zitharan affairs. One evening, Mark overheard them speaking in the corridors. They were plotting to discredit him, suggesting he could be manipulated or could make a mistake that would harm the city. Mark realized he was not just proving loyalty, he was navigating alien politics, a task far more complex than any technical challenge. The first real test came unexpectedly. A minor energy conduit in the palace failed suddenly, threatening to collapse a section of the floating gardens. Mark was nearby and rushed to assess the problem. Engineers were panicking, unsure of the correct sequence to restore the flow. Mark acted quickly, combining human logic and alien techniques. He stabilized the conduit, rerouted the energy, and prevented damage. The gardens hummed back to life, the floating plants glowing brighter than ever. The council members who had doubted him fell silent, impressed by his decisiveness and skill. Queen Elara appeared soon after. Her gaze swept over the restored gardens, then rested on Mark. "You act with courage and quick thinking," she said. "These qualities are rare. Perhaps humans have value beyond what I imagined." Mark bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only wish to protect Lyra and help your people." Lyra ran to his side, hugging his leg. "See, Mama? He cares." Elara's expression softened just slightly. "Care alone is not enough, but it is a beginning. Continue on this path, Mark, and you may yet prove yourself." That night, Mark reflected on the challenges he had faced. Every step had been difficult, every decision crucial. He had learned Zitharan customs, repaired vital systems, and even navigated political tension. But more than anything, he realized that his ingenuity, courage, and compassion, human qualities, were being recognized. Lyra curled beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. "You are different," she whispered. "You are not just part of the family. You are important." Mark smiled, feeling a warmth he had not known in a long time. "I will do my best," he said. "For you, for your mother, and for this world." He understood that the trials were far from over. Queen Elara's scrutiny would continue. Political rivals would continue to watch him. Danger, both from within and beyond Zithra, was inevitable. But Mark was no longer just a visitor or a bound servant. He was a participant, a protector, and perhaps in time a valued member of this alien world. As the twin suns rose over the glowing forests, Mark made a quiet promise to himself. He would face every trial, learn every rule, and protect those who depended on him. And he would show Zithra, and perhaps the galaxy, that a human could rise to challenges no one expected, using courage, intelligence, and heart. For the first time since arriving on Zithra, Mark felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. He had a mission, a friend in Lyra, and a challenge that tested him in ways he had never imagined. And though he was bound by an ancient law, he knew that his actions could shape the fate of an entire world. The glowing forest whispered in the morning wind, and Mark stepped forward, ready for whatever trials awaited. The next morning, Mark woke to the soft hum of Zithra's energy flowing through the palace. The twin suns were rising over the floating forests, casting golden and violet light across the crystalline towers. Today felt different. He could sense it in the air. The eyes of the council, the attention of the engineers, even the quiet watchfulness of Queen Elara. Something was shifting. Mark had learned a great deal about Zithra, but he also knew he had more to offer than just obedience. His human creativity and intuition, qualities the Zithrans sometimes lacked, could be an asset to the planet, especially if danger loomed. The first sign of change came when he was called to the council chambers. A small crisis had emerged. The floating garden's energy network, which he had helped stabilize before, was acting strangely. Certain sections flickered and dimmed despite normal flow. The engineers could not identify the cause. Mark examined the conduits and energy nodes. He noticed subtle anomalies in the patterns, small irregular pulses that suggested misaligned energy harmonics. Using human logic, he proposed a slight adjustment in the energy calibration that Zithrans had overlooked. The lead engineer raised an eyebrow. "You wish to override the standard protocol?" "Yes," Mark said firmly. "It's safe, but it needs to be done quickly or the network will fail." After a tense moment, the engineer nodded, allowing Mark to act. With careful precision, Mark realigned the nodes, stabilizing the flow. The gardens shimmered brighter than ever, the plants reacting as if they were alive, pulsing with vibrant energy. Several Zithrans watched in astonishment. Whispered comments passed among the council members. Queen Elara entered silently, observing the result. Mark bowed respectfully. "You act with skill and insight," she said. Her voice was measured, but there was approval behind the words. "Humans are resourceful. Perhaps more than I assumed." Mark felt a surge of pride but remained humble. "I only wish to help," he said. "For Lyra and for Zithra." Lyra skipped toward him, eyes bright. "See, Mama? He's really helping us." Elara's gaze softened slightly at her daughter's words. She turned and walked away, leaving Mark with a quiet acknowledgement. He was beginning to earn her respect. Over the next days, Mark continued to prove himself. He repaired ancient devices that had been abandoned for centuries, improved energy distribution across the palace, and even designed small safety measures for the floating gardens. Every success earned him subtle nods, quiet praise, and occasional cautious smiles from the council. But not all attention was positive. Some council members still whispered about the human, suspicious of his unpredictability. They questioned whether he truly understood Zithran culture, or if his methods might one day endanger them. Mark could feel their eyes on him, following his every move, but he refused to be intimidated. He had come too far. One evening, while walking with Lyra along a high ridge overlooking the glowing forests, she spoke softly. "Mama watches you closely now. She sees that you care not just for her but for all of us." Mark smiled faintly. "I want to be more than someone bound by an old law. I want to help to make a difference," Lyra nodded. "You already do. Everyone is starting to see it." As Mark continued to settle into Zithra, a new challenge appeared. A neighboring planet, long rumored to be aggressive, had sent a small fleet toward Zithra. Scouts had detected ships approaching, their intent unclear. Panic spread quietly among some of the council members. Queen Elara called an emergency meeting. Mark was invited to advise. At first, he hesitated. Strategy was not his specialty, but he had studied human history, tactics, and defense measures. He could offer insight. Standing before the council, he spoke carefully. "We do not know their intentions, but we can prepare. Their fleet moves predictably. If we use the floating terrain and energy fields wisely, we can create natural defenses. I can help design traps and diversions to protect the city." The room fell silent. Some council members whispered doubts, but Elara's gaze fixed on him. "Explain," she said. Mark outlined his ideas, repositioning energy flows to create barriers, using floating terrain to channel enemy ships into narrow passages, and employing automated defenses enhanced by Zithran technology combined with human ingenuity. He spoke clearly and concisely, showing how even small adjustments could prevent large losses. Lyra watched proudly, her hand brushing his arm. "Mama is listening," she whispered. Queen Alara nodded slowly. "Your reasoning is unusual for a human, yet it has merit. We will implement these measures." Over the next days, Mark worked tirelessly with the engineers. Together, they modified energy flows, reinforced strategic points, and designed simple yet effective diversions. His human perspective, thinking outside the Zitharan patterns, allowed them to anticipate weaknesses that would have been overlooked otherwise. As they prepared, Mark also trained with Lyra, teaching her small tactics, observation skills, and ways to anticipate danger. The girl learned quickly, her natural intelligence amplified by human guidance. She became his little partner in planning, reinforcing the bond between them. The day of the approaching fleet arrived. Zithara's skies filled with strange alien ships glowing in colors unlike anything Mark had seen. The council watched tensely, and Queen Alara's eyes were fixed on the horizon. Mark felt a surge of determination. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment. His plans, combined with Zitharan's skill, could make a difference. "Stay close to me," he whispered to Lyra. "We can do this." The first wave of ships approached, expecting little resistance. They were met with perfectly timed energy barriers, causing some to misfire and crash into each other. Narrow channels between floating mountains funneled the ships exactly as Mark had predicted, and Zitharan automated defenses disabled the enemy craft with precision. The council watched in awe. Mark moved through the command area, giving small directions, adjusting flows, and coordinating the defenses. His human logic, combined with Zitharan technology, created an unexpected advantage. Queen Alara observed silently, her eyes glowing faintly. She could see the truth now. This human was not merely bound by law or circumstance. He was resourceful, courageous, and capable of protecting her people. Hours passed, and the fleet began to retreat. The battle had been brief but decisive. Zithara was safe. The floating gardens, the palace, and the citizens were unharmed. Lyra ran to Mark, her small face shining with excitement. "You did it!" she exclaimed. Mark smiled, exhausted but proud. "We did it," he said. Together. Queen Alara approached, her steps quiet but purposeful. She looked at Mark, her expression unreadable at first. Then she nodded slowly. "You have proven something rare, human. Your courage, your ingenuity, it is unlike anything I have witnessed in centuries. Perhaps the ancient law was not only a binding, it was a test. And you have passed." Mark felt a rush of relief and pride. He had begun as a stranger, bound unwillingly by alien law. Now he had earned recognition, respect, and the beginning of trust. Lyra hugged him tightly. "See, Mama? I told you he is amazing." Alara's gaze softened further, just enough to show that her respect was genuine. "He is more than a servant," she admitted quietly. "He is an ally, and perhaps in time he may become something more." Mark understood the weight of her words. He was no longer merely following rules. He was shaping the future of this world. His human advantage, the creativity, problem-solving, and courage that humans often took for granted, had made a real difference. That night, as the twin suns set behind the floating mountains, Mark stood with Lyra on a high ridge overlooking the city. The glowing forest shimmered below, and the stars began to appear in the deep indigo sky. "You were amazing today," Lyra said softly. "Mama saw it. Everyone saw it." Mark smiled at her. "I just did what I could." "You taught me a lot too." Lyra hugged his arm. "No, you taught us all. Humans can be incredible." Mark looked at the horizon, feeling a deep sense of purpose. He had faced trials, dangers, and skepticism. He had used human ingenuity to protect an alien world, and earned the cautious respect of one of the most powerful queens he had ever met. But he knew the trials were not over. Challenges would come again, perhaps greater, perhaps more dangerous. Yet he felt ready. For Lyra, for Queen Alara, and for Zithara, he would continue to prove the value of humanity. And somewhere deep inside, Mark knew that one day, humans might surprise the galaxy even more than he had already surprised Zithara. For now, though he allowed himself a rare moment of pride, he had taken the first real step from being a bound stranger to becoming a trusted protector. The ancient law had brought him here, but it was his courage, his intelligence, and his heart that were beginning to define his place in this alien world. The glow of Zithara's twin suns painted the floating forests in shades of gold and violet. Mark stood atop a high ridge, surveying the horizon. Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Scouts had confirmed that the aggressive fleet spotted earlier was returning, larger this time and intent on attacking the planet. The council had gathered, and Queen Elara's gaze was sharper than ever. Mark adjusted the small device strapped to his wrist, checking the energy flows of the palace's defenses. He had spent days coordinating human ingenuity with Zetheran technology, ensuring the floating gardens, crystal towers, and energy conduits could withstand a direct assault. Lyra stood beside him, her small hand in his. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Mark nodded. "As ready as we can be. Remember, stay close, follow instructions, and trust the plan." Lyra nodded, her violet eyes shining with determination. "I will." Queen Elara entered silently, her presence commanding. "Mark," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Today we see if your loyalty and skill can protect my people. You are not just a guest, not just a servant. You are a part of this world now. Do not fail." Mark bowed deeply. "I will do my best, Your Majesty." The fleet appeared in the distance, alien ships glowing menacingly against the indigo sky. Hundreds of vessels moved in formation, their intent clear. Panic rippled through some of the council members, but Elara remained composed, trusting Mark's guidance. "Deploy the energy barriers," Mark ordered. "Position the defensive arrays along the floating mountains, and channel their ships into the narrow passages. Use the natural terrain to our advantage." The engineers and council members moved quickly, following his directions. Mark adjusted energy flows, realigned conduits, and coordinated with automated defenses. His mind worked rapidly, anticipating enemy maneuvers and creating traps in real time. The first wave of ships approached, confident and swift. They were met with perfectly timed energy barriers, sending some into collisions with floating rocks. Others were forced into narrow channels where automated turrets disabled them efficiently. The council members gasped in amazement. Mark moved calmly, issuing precise instructions. Every decision he made was calculated, combining human logic with Zetheran technology. His ability to see patterns and think creatively gave Zithera an edge the attackers had not anticipated. Lyra watched from beside him, her small hand gripping his arm. "You're amazing," she whispered. "Look at what you're doing." Mark smiled faintly but kept his focus. "We're doing this together," he said. "Stay alert." Hours passed and the fleet continued its assault. Each wave met with calculated defenses, guided by Mark's quick thinking and human intuition. The alien ships, confident at first, began to falter. Their formations broke and many ships were disabled or forced to retreat. From the ridge, Queen Elara watched silently, her glowing eyes fixed on the battlefield. She could see Mark's influence everywhere, the energy flows, the defenses, the precise coordination. The human had taken her people's technology and made it stronger, safer, and more effective. Finally, the last wave approached. Mark directed the defensive arrays, realigned energy conduits, and activated the palace's central energy pulse. Beams of light shot across the sky, creating barriers that channeled the enemy into traps they could not escape. Within minutes, the alien fleet began a full retreat, battered and confused. Zithera was safe. Lyra cheered, running toward Mark. "We did it. We saved everyone." Mark knelt, hugging her tightly. "Yes, we did," he said. "You were brave too, Lyra." The council members gathered, murmuring in awe. Even the skeptics could not deny the human's brilliance and courage. Queen Elara stepped forward, her steps deliberate and commanding. "Mark," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you have proven yourself beyond expectation. You did not simply follow orders. You protected my people, preserved our homes, and showed ingenuity and courage unmatched by any in my experience." Mark bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only wish to help and protect, especially Lyra." Elara's glowing eyes softened as she looked at him. "You have gone beyond the binding of the ancient law. You are no longer merely bound to us. You are a protector, a valued member of this world. Your actions have earned respect and trust." Mark felt a warmth in his chest. Weeks ago he had been a stranger, bound unwillingly by a law he barely understood. Now he was recognized not just as a human visitor, but as someone who had earned his place in an alien world. Lyra ran forward, hugging Mark's leg. "See, Mama? I told you he was special." Elara's expression softened fully, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes, Lyra, you were right. She turned to Mark. You have shown that humans are resourceful, courageous, and loyal. Perhaps one day more will see the value of your kind. Mark straightened, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. I hope so. Humanity can offer much if given the chance. The council members bowed to him, their skepticism replaced with admiration. Engineers and citizens alike acknowledged the human who had saved their world. For the first time, Mark felt truly at home on Scythera, not as a bound stranger, but as a valued protector. As night fell, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the glowing forests. Mark stood with Lyra and Alara atop the ridge, looking down at the city he had helped protect. Lyra looked up at him, her violet eyes full of trust. You stayed, you helped, and you never gave up. I knew you would do it. Mark smiled, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. And I will continue to help. No matter what comes, I will protect you in this world. Alara's voice was soft, almost reflective. You have proven that even a human, bound by an ancient law, can change the course of history. Your courage and ingenuity are rare. Scythera is fortunate to have you. Mark felt a deep sense of purpose. He had come to Scythera as a stranger, bound unwillingly by law. He had faced challenges, political tension, and danger. He had used human ingenuity, problem-solving, and courage to protect an alien world. And now he had earned respect, trust, and a place in a civilization far beyond anything he had known. Lyra squeezed his hand. You are part of our family now, she said softly. Mark looked at the horizon, the glowing forests, and the palace's shimmering towers. I am honored, he said, and I will continue to protect it, for you, for your mother, and for this world. Queen Alara placed a hand lightly on Mark's shoulder, a rare gesture of acknowledgement. Your place here is earned, human, not by law alone, but by heart, mind, and courage. You have shown the galaxy the value of humanity, even in a world that did not understand it. Mark smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment he had never known. He had fed one small child weeks ago, unaware that it would lead him to a world of wonder, danger, and responsibility. That small act of kindness had set in motion events that had changed a civilization's fate, and had shown Scythera the strength and value of humans. As the stars began to appear in the deep indigo sky, Mark, Lyra, and Queen Alara stood together, looking out over the glowing forests. The twin suns had set, but their light lingered, reflecting off the floating mountains and shimmering rivers. Scythera was safe, its people grateful, and a human, small, clever, and courageous, had proven that even the most unlikely beings could make a difference. Mark realized then that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown worlds and challenges, but if humanity could survive Earth, navigate the stars, and adapt as he had, then humans could earn respect wherever they went. And on Scythera, he had started that journey. Lyra leaned against him, her small hand in his. We're safe now, she said softly. Yes, Mark said, smiling down at her. But we will always be ready, together. Queen Alara nodded in agreement. Let this day be remembered not only for the victory, but for the courage and loyalty that made it possible. Humans may be young in the galaxy, but today you have proven that even the youngest can shine brightly. Mark looked at the glowing horizon once more. He had arrived as a stranger, bound unwillingly by law. He was leaving this chapter of his life as a protector, a hero in an alien world, and a symbol of humanity's courage and ingenuity. And as the night deepened, with stars twinkling over the floating mountains, Mark knew one thing for certain. Feeding one small child had changed not only his life, but the fate of an entire civilization, and the galaxy had taken notice.